And I'm not saying the work does not need to be done. I'm saying the way it's been done, almost under the cover of darkness. I was very upset when it was initiated, and I was not informed about it because it's in the district, and I've been fielding phone calls and emails, and I voiced my concern about that yesterday. I don't like the fact that the city all of a sudden is doing things because we can do it. Perception is reality in this town. Mr. Gianni, Mr. Gianni, I hope your business thrives. I really do. I want nothing but success for you. But you did say one thing when you were speaking about someone discussed it with you about an improvement that could be done to your business, which evidently is this wall and the patio and everything. Who presented that to you? That was your personal opinion. Okay, because you didn't come across that way when you stated it. You said somebody had presented it to you. Okay.
My personal opinion, visualizing, no business owner, I don't need to get much of the time to answer your question.
No, that's fine. I thank you for that.
As a business owner, when I came to this town, I looked at that building and I realized that there was a vision from that what came out exactly the vision that we had.
To answer what I say is that that was my understanding that this could be an improvement because we had a vision. When I came here in this restaurant, when I turned the house into a restaurant, I had the vision that exactly what is in there now. When it was presented to me and in such a way, I thought it would be an improvement. And that was my opinion, and still it is. I do have a vision of that place that will be better at the end of this project, and that's just to answer your question.
Okay, that's fine. I thank you so much. Now, John, Mr. Peters, I'm sorry.
John's fine.
Okay, thank you. And back at John, too.
I understand.
Okay. Now, once everything's done, if we go look at picture, looking up to the north.
Existing condition?
What's going to be the slope there for people to go down? How much of a slope is that going to be?
Well, at the end of the sidewalk, they're going to have to redo the driveway entrance to funnel the sidewalk back to where originally area was. That was part of the problem with the original plan, was there was a significant slope coming off of their original cafe area down into that sidewalk, which did not meet ADA requirements. We had a discussion back last fall about the fact that something had to be done, and the only way we could achieve that slope was to take it back toward the curb. So back in the fall, when we said that the raised platforms were not going to work, that was part of the discussion back then, was that we were going to need to go back over toward the curb in order to achieve ADA compliance, because it's one of those things where if you're straight, but then you add some twists and turns, you add limbs to it, which allows you to flatten the slope out.
Yeah, well,
which is what we were trying to achieve.
It just seems, again, I'll reserve for a couple more comments, but I'll defer right now to Mr. Ralston.
Thank you. Mayor, thank you. Could you put, Misty, could you put picture number 2, the first one you put up on there? I just wanted to have that for John to look at.
Picture number 2?
Picture number 2, yes. The deck, with the wood decking. Second one. That's it. Let me make one comment, first of all, and that is my old saw. We all have the tendency to want to manage. That's just an inherent thing. We want to do it. I want one way, you want another way. And we divert our responsibility to set policy. And if this is a management issue, then we ought to discuss that with her, but it's still with our manager, but it's still a management decision and not a council decision. First of all, that's just a policy statement. Secondly, I certainly agree with Mr. Tucker that we ought not to exclusively be dealing with ADA. However, in my opinion, the ADA is very important. ADA is a federal law, and it's a federal law principally. It has state tentacles as well, but you don't want to be in federal court. And I imagine, Mr. Peters, that the law allows ADA, the law allows those that are disabled to sit on those wooden, have lunch on those wooden tables there, that wooden area. And as they do now, as they can now. And if that's the case, it seems to me there is a significant hazard for falling and tripping if you are elderly like me, perhaps, or just disabled, or you have an artificial hip, or you have crutches, or you're in a wheelchair. You have as much right as I do or you do to sit on those cafe tables, and therefore it seems to me complying with the ADA is crucial to make sure that's done properly, and we're not ADA lack of out of compliance with ADA and always risking litigation. So I think it's crucial, if you agree with that statement about those that are handicapped having the right to sit there as well. Is ADA as important as I think it is to you?
Well, I appreciate you trying to help me, but I think it's more critical than that.
Thank you.
Most of you on council were not here, I believe, in 2013. I know Ms. Hothway, and she knows what I'm, and Mr. Jerome. Both of you all probably know what I'm getting ready to say, which is the city of Mount Dora is on a consent decree with the federal government over ADA. We had multiple complaints prior to 2013 with regard to ADA compliance, primarily in the downtown area. We need to remember our heaviest pedestrian traffic is in downtown. So the sidewalk inventory that we did in 2013 was born out of that decree. We agreed to spend a minimum of $50,000 a year on ADA compliance. So we are under a federal order to do so. So I take the matter very seriously. We have 4 locations in downtown that I believe are critical ADA compliance problems. I'm working on all 4. This one actually was my second one on the list. My first area was on 5th between Donnelly and Alexander. That situation is horrible. And quite frankly, I'm going to give you forewarning, there will be a wall there. Because of the same, a much more extreme example of elevation change. So, I'm in the unenviable position of virtually anything I do in downtown to achieve ADA compliance, I'm probably going to upset somebody in some way, shape, or form. What I try to do is to come up with a good engineering solution that works for everyone. In the end, we will have an ADA compliant sidewalk. We will have the ability for the property owner to utilize the cafe ordinance that's in place. So, in my view, it was a best of all worlds situation. I'll be very candid with you. I was on vacation end of last week. I was asked to call my boss while I was on vacation. It's never a pleasant thing. I ended up spending quite a bit of my vacation racking my brain as to if I could have done something different.
My view is that you and our manager have an absolute duty to bring us into compliance with ADA, and if this is the way to do it, I support it 100%, whether I like the result aesthetically or not. I do appreciate it. I eat at Gianni's restaurant, and I love it, and that's not an issue at all. To me, the issue is a legal one that has to be met and has to be met.
But if I can do one real quick thing, using the picture that's up there, and I think this is very critical. That particular picture, if we could have taken care of the ADA compliance on the far end, we had trip hazards and people stepping down off of a platform into an ADA compliant sidewalk, which goes back to what you said before about, people falling and what have you. But what I was really concerned with in that particular picture is if you look to the far left next to the on-street parking, we had about a 18 to 24 inch wide brick area there that sloped severely away from the curb. It was not a good situation. In fact, in downtown, we have been taking planters out and putting brick in to avoid that very situation, because it's too narrow for people to get out, and then they have to kind of walk a tightrope to get to somewhere where they can get onto the sidewalk. And so that was one of my major concerns, was replicating something like that. And so that's why I ended up with the sidewalk over by the curb to get ADA compliant, and the wall was to deal with those separations and grades that we see there in that picture. So I felt like it was the best compromise to a difficult situation.
I respect that, and I support what our manager has said. I think that those explanations, nearly 3 pages of explanation, helps me understand why it's being done and the reason why it needed to be done. I support doing it, but it's not my decision, it's the manager's decision, and I support the decision. Thank you. Well, I have a difficult position here in that I agree with, well, it's not difficult to agree with you, is that I agree with the management part. And a lot of the questions that people have brought up have been about angles and whatnot. So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole particularly far, but I don't understand how it's our responsibility to correct improperly done construction to begin with. So if mentally I take away that structure in the before picture, what was wrong? What was it that we as the citizens had to pay for before that was started? And that's the part that needs to be answered, whether it's now or at another point. But I want to speak on policy. And the policy is the citizens own citizens' property. The property of that sidewalk there now is not, as I understand it, accessible. I'll tell you, the smart aleck in me wants to walk every time there's a restaurateur sitting in there across what was that sidewalk, figuring, because I checked the property on the public records, that's city property. I don't know how to reconcile for citizens that ask me, how can we take public property and make it, well, I'm not speaking a legal term, but a de facto private property? I don't understand. From a policy perspective, I cannot imagine me leaving council, me leaving my life in this city, knowing that I was part of the first one of the giveaway of sidewalk. And over, we're going to have a city that's all scrunched up and weird. I believe in this concept called incrementality. And I can tell you that Mount Dora is a wonderful, wonderful place. But incrementally, we have the ability to destroy it. 5-story parking garages, encroachment on walkways that make things less usable and less pleasing for people to walk by. I don't get it. So from a policy perspective, I want to figure out a way to make people whole. I don't really care what mistakes were made, or, well, I care, but without regard to what mistakes were made or weren't made, we need to make sure that we protect the citizens' property. And I just need to get that fully, completely, not halfway answered, but completely answered, is how can we as a board allow, as a policy thing, for our management to give away city property? And if it can be reconciled, then I don't have much more to stand on. That's my main part.
I heard 2 questions. The first one was, why does the city have a role here? The reason the city had a role to begin with is that we had an ADA compliance issue with regard to what would be the southern end of that driveway when it goes into the driveway. So we had a role with regard to ADA compliance. It was on my list of 4 locations in downtown that remained that needed to be dealt with. So that's why we have a role. The second part of the question you have is giving up city property for the use of a private business. And the simple answer to that is a previous city council made that decision of putting in the sidewalk cafe ordinance. When when the ordinance.
Well, I'm gonna have to stop you there, because I can't have you speaking on legal matters. I can tell you, I got as much legal background as you do, and I can tell you that a cafe ordinance is about movable items. You can tell me about the tap cons, and I've built walls too. That is not a movable wall. So please don't get on about how this is somehow part of the cafe piece. I mean, I can't sit here with 13,000 people behind me cringing at home if they're watching this, the same thing. That's not right. And I just can't buy it. And if the attorney wants to speak on that, that's fine, but I really don't care to hear the engineer talk about legal stuff.
We'll just.
I'd still like him to continue with his answer if you don't mind. Thank you. You're not the chair. Chair, if you'd like that, you know, what you say.
He's going to continue, and thank you.
That's fine. Call me out of order.
No, you're not out of
You know,
order.
I got the same angst as the citizens of this town. I love this town as much as everyone else, and I can say that when people get angry and upset, I don't get mad at them, because I know underneath it is a deep love for this city. And I have a deep love for this city just as much as anyone else does, and I'm passionate about it. And I don't want anyone dismissing my passion and desire to do a darn good job with me just being upset. So, I need to know why, for the next 50 years, when I walk by there, that I know why the city property was given away, and I'd like really someone that really understands the legal part of this to give us an answer.
I agree with that. And I think if we have that legal answer, you know, why, because I think his question is very, very appropriate, and at this point.
Point of order, though, before we get into that, ought we not to give the courtesy of the speaker to finish the comment or to answer the rest of the question?
No, he will. But the part of the question was the legal part of the question. I think that, and if that can be answered better by the attorney than by Mr. Peters, then I would like to hear if there is an answer.
Well, can you hear me? I haven't prepared a formal legal opinion since it's not technically on your agenda, but from my review of the cafe ordinance, it does provide for this type of activity, and it specifically says that nothing done within there is intended to be or constructed as an interest in real property. And I understand that the standalone wall, as is constructed for the ADA, was necessary as part of the railing alternative. Now, it is true what we said earlier, that the ADA requirements are federal mandate. They are superseding all of our codes. We're bound by the federal laws and the state laws to the extent, you know, that they supersede us, and so we have to comply with those overall first. That's my opinion at this point, and I know, Diane, I'm sorry.
I think the main thrust of the question: are we giving away city property?
It is not my legal opinion at this point that we are.
Okay, I think that was the main point of that one question. There was a second part of the question that forget which one it was, but that one
Well,
you're good to go.
I mean, he interrupted me when I was talking about the cafe part, and I would just revise where I was heading and point out that we have very similar situation, two different locations over on 3rd. We have a similar location at the corner of 4th and Alexander, where we had to put walls in order to achieve the ramps. We essentially, for instance, if you go to the kitchen supply store at the corner of 4th and Alexander, we have an ADA compliant ramp. We end up with a sidewalk that is fully enclosed. And so it's not a whole lot different than that. It's part of achieving ADA compliance. Sometimes in achieving ADA compliance, we're going to create a less than desirable situation. If it was up to me, I would love to have an upper sidewalk and a lower sidewalk. Lower sidewalk is ADA compliant, but we have the elevation change, and I don't want to encourage people to use a non-ADA compliant sidewalk. We're going to have the same thing on 5th between Donnelly and Alexander. Actually worse. It's a very tough decision-making process. We're not giving up our property. The cafe ordinance is very specific. If there's a problem down the road, we tell them to remove the wall. we have that authority under the cafe ordinance. So it gives it the ability to, you know, it's Flavia would say, to take back our land. But, you know, like I said, it was a difficult project. Took some time, and you know, felt like it was the best solution given the circumstances.
So you mentioned the best solution. You mentioned also only way. So then, if someone were to ask you to show us the other alternatives that you put together and dismissed, would we be able to see those with drawings and measurements of angles of sidewalk and to see how those wouldn't? Because
I can outline 3 different options that I looked at. There's no drawing per se. We measured it in the field. One of them was to leave the sidewalk in the location it was. We were going to have to basically regrade the whole sidewalk. We have those columns that are out there that have been there for a number of years that we would have had to dealt with. And then the other option, what I just said a few minutes ago, which is dual sidewalk.
So, but in that answer, see, there are no drawings of those other options. So it's just eyeball engineering, as I would call it. And then my final thing is, I'm going to say this. Like many of you, I've been married many years. There's some things that I can do legally as part of my marriage, and I absolutely will not do them because they're just not smart. That's how you get to be married 30 years. And in our city, there are things, and I'm speaking here now to our manager, there are some things that you just have to keep in mind about our city. We love our downtown, and we all take it personally. Well, I say all. Many of us take it personally. We really care about it. And one of the citizens spoke of intent, and I don't agree with that. I don't see any ill intent, but it's about packaging and more information. The historic board wasn't aware of it. I don't believe the CRA was aware of it. The council wasn't aware of it, and I think those things help keep citizens less upset if they're part of it along the way. I still won't understand how the historic board wasn't consulted. You know, they give their time to help keep our city historic in nature, and while it might be okay that we don't have to ask them or run it by them, it just seems like the thing to do. I don't know if there's a Mount Dora way, but to me, that would be the way to do it. So that would be my angst about this, is that I feel, and the word is feel, that the citizens were kind of left out, and they feel it's like their city. And I think more of that makes them feel better.
Okay, so I'm confounded by this on so many levels. I'm confounded that there were, you know, that this was sort of engineering in the field. I mean, if we have stormwater issues, which I understand are part of it, but before I go any further, Misty, can you put up the very first drawing, the one that was the prior to being improved? Yeah. So this is what it looked like when we first started, Ed and I first started going to Gianni's almost on a weekly basis because we love the food so much. And there were 3 tables there sort of nestled up behind the building, and that's what I thought was, you know, taking advantage of the Sidewalk Cafe. It's a pleasant place to sit, have a glass of wine. We ate there numerous times, and we'll continue to do so. I never really saw the need to do anything with the sidewalk. Now, because maybe, I may not be aware of ADA compliance issues, and I certainly understand that, and we want to comply definitely, you know, wherever and whenever we can. But if it had been left like that, could you have improved that sidewalk and made that ADA compliant, even if you had to get rid of some of those bricks or take that whole brick section down? That still would have, one, allowed a Sidewalk Cafe operation, which is allowable, but it's not like, to me, this ordinance says, if it's feasible, these are the rules by which you must operate this adjunct to your business. Not everybody has the right to do it. So in other words, if it's feasible, then these are the rules that you have to follow. So first question, could we have achieved ADA compliance without increasing seating?
We could,
Without doing
Okay.
anything else? No walls, no decks, no nothing. Could we do it with that?
okay, when you look at the picture, there are two serious issues here. The first one is the ADA compliance, and yes, we could have fixed the ADA compliance by taking out about half of the sidewalk and redoing it on a flatter slope. The second problem is a risk management standpoint, and that is that paved section coming off the back of the curb when people are getting out of their cars. It is a very severe slope, and the likelihood of people slipping and falling on that is very high.
Okay, and that is city property, correct?
That is
That's all
correct.
city property. So, in other words, without, separate the cafe part of it completely. The cafe's got their tables up against the wall of the building. We could come into compliance and fix all of our slip and fall, slope, etc., ADA issues as a separate thing, correct?
No. The problem we have here is.
Have to build a wall in order to fix it?
Hang on a second. If I get my ADA compliance, which actually was the easy fix. The hard fix was the risk management part where the pavers are. If I flatten those out to what is standard, which would be 2%,
Mhm.
I would have had about a 1 foot drop off between the pavers and the sidewalk. We would have had to deal with that somehow, a railing, a wall, or something. So I can't get away from the fact that no matter what I did, I was going to end up with an elevation change. And that's the dilemma that I was in. And as I said to Mr. Slavy a few minutes ago, 3 different options, none of them good.
But none of what I'm trying to get at is, does a wall and taking up almost an entire, let me put the, taking up an entire sidewalk, turning an entire sidewalk land into a cafe, that just somehow seems that it's counterintuitive to being the solution to solve your ADA thing.
Right.
But let me move on, because I'm not an engineer.
Okay.
So we have a historic advisory board, historic preservation advisory board, for a purpose. And that purpose is to preserve the historic flavor of our downtown and our historic buildings. That building is on the drawing of the eligible, or whatever they call it, the, eligible counted buildings is counted as historic. Any change to the appearance, to the outside appearance of those historic properties needs to have approval, and a certificate of appropriateness or whatever of the historic board beforehand. Even if the city doesn't have to follow its own code to do that, that's still the right thing to do it. It would have, we wouldn't be sitting here discussing this tonight if the historic board had had a chance to chop on it. They're very easy to work with. They don't just go, no, you can't. They try to help you find an alternative if what is being proposed is, against the historic codes. I think that they could have found alternatives. There's a lovely deck up on top on the second floor that's partially got a railing on it now, perhaps, and I'm just sort of, for additional seating with, oh my gosh, look at this, you can see the lake, you've got the sunset now, you're not looking at cars, even though, it's a nice little place to sit down there, out in front of the building. But, there's stairs down from the back of it. I just have an issue that, if we have ordinances to guide us in what can and can't be done, and we expect our citizens to follow these, then we as the city, I think, should lead by example. We shouldn't look for loopholes. We should expect the same level of standard. We should expect a higher level of conformance and standard for our projects, for our city projects, even than we do for our citizens. If we find that an ordinance or rule isn't working for the majority, or an exception needs to be made, then do that on a case-by-case basis, but make it out in the open. Everybody knows about it. Historic Board knows about it. Council gets at least read in on it. Changes are made in writing. They're clear. They're unambiguous. We just need to follow our own rules, and show the citizens that what we expect of them to do, we also expect of ourselves. And this is the kind of mess that just erodes trust in our government, because, as I think Mr. Tucker said, perception becomes reality if you perceive it long enough. So my final statement is, just because we don't have to doesn't mean that we shouldn't. And I'm going to turn it over to somebody else. Mr. Krill?
I don't have any questions for you, Mr. Peters, but I guess what I see here is more of a problem with the process rather than the product. I do think it's going to be safer. I do agree that we need to be in compliance with federal ADA laws and so on, but I'm disappointed, deeply disappointed, that for whatever reason, unintentional, I hope, that we weren't, Ms. Toad said, read in, and I think that's a good word for it. I think the Historic Preservation Board could have been helpful. I think discussion at City Council, I think a public meeting describing 3 lousy alternatives to solving a difficult problem, and would have garnered, I wouldn't take this thing on myself. I would want to get input, answer questions so that understanding among community members is better, garner support, and allow others to share in that difficult decision, so that not everybody's going to be happy, but at least they'll understand there was a process and so on. That's what's, I guess that's what's under my craw right now. So thanks for letting me share that.
Briefly, John, if you look at this picture, and let me preface something, because I think my words were taken out of context by Councilman Ralston, I didn't appreciate it. I'm firmly want this city to be ADA compliant, okay? What I didn't like was everything being wrapped around ADA in the last 4 days. Even the little signs that went up a day ago, we're making them outdoor ADA compliant. Those signs weren't there for 3 days, but somehow they went up yesterday late in the afternoon, because they weren't there at 4 o'clock, but they were there at 6 or 7. Now, looking at this picture, and you're telling us, and I agree with you 100%, that according to this picture, the slope there is the bad guy, right? That slope is causing a lot of problems, and what you have to correct.
At the far end.
Yes.
And the slope of the paved area coming off the back of the curb. Two separate issues. The sidewalk with ADA, the pavers on the slope with risk management.
Okay, now the next question, the city didn't put those pavers in. The city did not put those pavers in because per the report, we're being given those pavers. They're gonna be a gift to us to use around the town. So, you don't receive a gift if they're yours to begin with. Those pavers were put in by somebody. I don't know who. I'm assuming maybe the owner of the building. I don't know.
That's streetscape project.
That was a streetscape project?
That's a streetscape project.
No, that was not a streetscape project.
It's my understanding from my long-term employee that the city was involved in the placement of those pavers.
Yes.
Okay, I was told the opposite by several people, and that was not a streetscape project.
That was way back. That was before.
That was not a streetscape project.
It was the first phase.
No, it wasn't. That was
It wasn't
not the
agreed
first
to.
phase. of
Then it was
the
right
streetscape.
before that we got into that.
Well,
No.
again, why are we being given back our pavers then?
I thought what they said is we were going to store them when we took them up.
No. I've been told that we were giving those back to use around town.
I'm just listening to what Ms. Hayes said.
That will come back to the papers, will be the cities will store them and reuse them.
That's what you said.
In the city, and that's what I put in the report too, that those will, whether I say come back to the city, but those will be removed
Well-
by the contractor, so that's what I mean by come back to the city.
Everything
Turn it
I've
over to us.
been able to find out so far is that the city didn't do that work.
Well, we should have there should be some documentation that
If
public.
I'm wrong, I will
Who
definitely.
did that?
Yeah.
We'll
Ma'am.
be taking the pavers, so that's my
Yeah.
issue on that.
No, but the pavers are causing the issue.
Pavers aren't another causing issue.
Yeah.
I know
So
where-
I don't,
know where you're coming from with this.
again, this may go back, if the city did do it, and it was done wrong, because it caused the problem, why wasn't it corrected then? And two, I asked, and I'm not trying to cast stones, make anybody a bad guy. If I were saying, well, who makes sure everything's done right? I asked for architectural drawings, I asked for plans. No, we don't need those because we're doing it right. That was not done right. Am I wrong? That does not appear to be done right from what
No.
you've been telling me.
I cannot speak to who did the work the first.
Oh, I'm not, I know you didn't do it, John, but,
But I will assure you, I'm going by there at least twice a day to make sure that it's being done correctly.
oh, I know, and I know it will be done correctly,
So
but,
you're getting the highest level of inspection in the city you can possibly get on this particular
Yeah.
job.
but it's, and I do want to apologize, I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to directly attack you at all. I'm attacking
No offense.
the
no
way
offense
the
taken.
process was handled. And I understand the work probably needed to be done. Again, I would have put a sidewalk in first before I put that wall in, and I wouldn't have cared about an extra $50 or $1,000 for a load of concrete when the city could have been sued for $1 million. But it's, hopefully as we move forward on this, I think everybody has learned, and I'm not trying to micromanage, that's the farthest thing from my mind, is micromanaging. I just don't like the way it was implemented. And
I understand.
Unfortunately, Mr. Tucker, we didn't have a chance to micromanage. So, no, not unfortunately, but we didn't, that was the wrong phrase, not unfortunately, because we don't micromanage, but we never had a chance to micromanage. Ms. Oaks, you have a comment?
Yes. In listening to everything, I think we've gotten away from where the focus needs to be because it's as Mr. Quayle said, it's a process issue. It's a process issue.
If you talk too close, it breaks up.
Okay? It's a process. Okay?
Yeah.
It's a process issue. It was implied that this happened suddenly. Well, the reality is it started in October of 2015. We have had a visitor, we have had a merchant and a landowner working through a process that, as I understand it, Ms. Hayes, was guided with city input. They applied for and received all the permits they needed to do. They recognized the activity level during the season, so they delayed. They came back, you all met with them, They completed what they believed was to be appropriate, but there was some misunderstandings of some of it. You all stopped it. They had already spent all that money. You stopped it, re-looked at it, redesigned it, working together with them, and they then implemented, or in the process of implementing that. Now, it's my understanding, based on what we have in place now, normal procedure would not have been for it to go through preservation. I'm not saying that we don't need to look at changing that, but right now, from what I understand, that's not the process. Same thing with CRA. So if we need to change process or we need to change the ordinance, then that's where I think we need to be looking at. I look around town and I made a list because part of that cafe the discussion came in, and then the council that put it in was to address the request of a number of restaurateurs who wanted the ability to do that. There was a lot of discussion that indeed that was part of the ambiance of Mount Dora. People love the outside, they love being able to sit outside, and it became an issue of how do we do it to where it's a win-win for everyone, and that it doesn't take away from the city, and it doesn't give away to the restaurateurs or the property owners, but that we all win with it. And as I sit here and think and work my way around the town, we did the 4th Avenue Mall, and we did a lot of work down there in order to handle the elevations for Pisces Rising. We did it in front of Cecile's to help them prosper and develop differently than what they had been for years, and there's a nice area there that people enjoy doing it. We go across the street and go down to the Olive Branch, and the nice area that was put in out there. Right now, the Magical Meat Boutique is in the midst of doing a lot of work to expand, and there was also work done there that had to accommodate the walls and things, and that was all done during the streetscape project, am I not correct? With variances and adjustments to allow what is there now to be there, because those of us who remember when it was a laundromat, that level of accessibility and thing was not there, but we as a town, whether you use the word creative or what, came up with a way that that area could be improved. And on busy nights, a wheelchair's not going to get through there unless you're moving the people apart, because fortunately there's been success of what we've done, and hopefully, I'm going to guess, Phil, one of the reasons he's doing and putting in more investment into that corner property with the train and everything is to even make it an additional venue for or an expanded venue for, anyway, I could work my way all the way around town is in the attempt that we have. And if we have to go back and look at the cafe ordinance in respect to, I believe, Mr. Slavy, you brought it up, should the chairs and tables come in and everything, whether that's practical or not, I think we'll debate it. But all around town, we've seen that develop, and it adds to that feel of what those of us who've been here for 35 and 40 years have seen developed as part of what draws people to downtown. Now, do they sit out there in this weather and for the next couple months? Probably not as much. But if you'll think back to the fall and the winter, that's the areas that are packed. So I don't have an answer for where we are now other than recognizing it appears to me that the property owner and Mr. Gianni all believed they were following what we as a city were guiding them to do. And they did that. Mr. Gianni, who has the restaurant, has his vision. He has a right to have that vision of how he would like to be. I, as Ms. Tillett, I ate there and sat out there, and to me, the tables were uneven and difficult, so I was not surprised when I saw him trying to do something different. I didn't know what it needed to be, but it was not comfortable to sit in the tables the way they were. So I believe the improvements they're trying to do is to make it a better dining experience for visitors and residents. The ADA requirements, I think we all should, and we probably do. And oh, by the way, Mr. Slavy, I think we all love Mount Dora up here. It's not just you. We wouldn't be here.
I didn't
say you did, but
But
the passion of what you said. So I think we all do. So we're all up here for that. But we see it differently. We see it differently, and that's what is good about our seeing it differently, because we can debate it then as to what should or shouldn't be, because one road isn't necessarily the right road, okay? From my perspective, in all respect to you. So, anyway, I think we're trying to figure out how do you meet these ADA requirements, because if you think this section is difficult, wait till we get to Fifth Avenue. Because everybody wonders why we don't have a lot of stores on that side of the road and why they have trouble renting it and why are the empty stores. Well, just walk down there once or twice and you'll see why. It is very, very uncomfortable to walk on that side of the road, and that's something we're going to have to address. But as Mr. Peters said, we had 4 major areas when we were put on notice that we needed to get in compliance and have a process to do that. And you know, with all respect, Mr. Peters, when you say 50,000, that's a drop in the bucket to what we're going to need to spend for sidewalks to make us the walkable town we have been and need to continue to be, but to deal with where we're having these issues continually to erupt. Okay, and I think we all had emails in the last week or two about the sidewalks and how much money we're going to spend, and that's going to be something with the capital plan we'll have to address, and it's probably going to be more than $50,000, just like it's going to be more than $50,000 for trees. I mean, that's just what it's going to be. So, I don't know the answer to this, but what I do feel is that we need to recognize, from everything I've heard, the property owner and Mr. Gianni thought they were doing what they needed to be doing. There was nothing in secret. Something that's been on the books since 2015 is not a secret. Did the activity start much faster because they're kind of trying to, I'm going to guess, and I haven't had any conversation with any of them, but they're probably trying to capitalize on the next couple of months before we have another busy season. I don't blame them, I would too, because we've been very fortunate that this past year and all the work we have spent the last couple of years doing has brought larger and larger crowds to Mount Dora to come as a destination and leave, because a lot of residents just want them to leave, and I understand that too. I want them to spend their money. Realtors want them to buy houses and all that, but part of what we have is that outside dining brings that to it. Now I'm rambling, so I'm going to stop. I think I've made my point, because Mr. Maybe I can be just as passionate, but looking at it from a different way.
Is it going to be in addition to things?
No, it's going to be my own additional wrap up from my standpoint comments. 3 things. Legal counsel was consulted, legal counsel advised our manager, engineers were consulted, engineers advised, engineers approved, and as the previous speaker said, it's been nearly 20 months since this has been, in her words, on the books. Albeit not publicly notified. Second comment, somebody mentioned, I forget who it was, that pavers were a problem. Pavers aren't the problem, it's the slope that's the problem. And pavers just happen to be there. Third, and final comment, Mr. Crail had some good comments that there was kind of a surprise here and everybody didn't have the facts that they now have. And so therefore, that unknown caused some of the trauma that is here, that I'm feeling here tonight. So that's, I would call it a learning experience. However, I caution for one, when does the manager feel a need to avoid getting a verbal spanking, so to speak, on any project that's within management control? When we're going to do X, Y, Z, or when we're going to paint light posts, is she now afraid she has to come have a public meeting and have everybody come here? I don't think so, but it's a good idea to discuss this. It's worthy of discussing. It's democracy in action right here. But I for one want to stick with a management decision, as I've said before, and be careful of bringing up things that are strictly in management's prowess, unless it comes to the council and she brings it to the council. Maybe she'll bring more things to us now to make it public for everybody. If that's what she chooses to do, that's fine. But I think the decision is being made by management, and it should stick with that, and we should go forward. and it had a great airing on it. I respect everybody's comments, even those that were passionate on the council and in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wrap up too. Well, you let everybody else talk, so. If I have a problem with the city in being involved, turning over publicly owned property that will benefit only a private business by erecting a permanent structure on a city sidewalk. I just do. I just think that that's wrong. It will benefit the business owner and not the taxpayer. And that's my final comment.
And just my final comment, Mr. Mayor, and I will be quiet. And the reason I'm concerned about the way this was handled, because Mr. Gianni's coming out looking like a bad guy to people. And he's not. But the way this was done, he got looking like the bad guy. And that's the farthest thing that anybody wanted to happen. But the way this is played out, and that's it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, may I?
Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Tucker, I hear what you're saying, but we have a city manager who's been here for 8 months. She doesn't know a lot of the history. So she is trying, at least from what I see, she is trying to do her job, and she believes in
I know
all
that.
right. So we've got to
I know that, Ms. Weiss. I know she's doing it.
Finish my statement, please.
Please.
What she is getting through this discussion, I would think, is a clearer definition of what we might expect. And I think we've already mentioned, or I have, there's probably a couple of other projects then we'd like to know more about, because they weren't putting on any scrutiny to us either. And I will tell you that a couple of weeks ago, I went in her office because I wasn't happy about seeing the beautiful plants we planted a year ago, or 2 years ago, and spent all that money on. All of a sudden, they're now becoming bricks, until I heard the explanation and saw what she was doing and said, okay, whether I like it or not, it makes sense, and that was in her purview to do.
I'm not
And
attacking
she
the mayor.
needs to have that latitude, and we just need to give her then the direction of what all we need to have brought here.
I'm not attacking the city manager. I'm saying the way this played out was probably a learning curve for all of us. But the bottom line, per Mr. Gianni's statement, that he is the one that's gotten bad press out of it, and basically comments made to him and his family, and it didn't have to happen.
Okay.
But see, that's unfortunate that
It's unfortunate, but
behave that
yes,
way.
yes.
Okay.
People make
I
that
know,
choice
okay,
to behave that way.
right, okay, I know we have to cut it off, and we have a lot of other resolutions we have to do, and I really pray that, like I always mention before, the council comes up with some good things. Unfortunately, and you mentioned the one word there, it's a learning curve. It's a learning one of those learning experiences that the city has. Yes, we do have a new city manager, it's 8 months, and there's a lot of little things in the history of this town that she's not aware of, and a lot of other, I'm relatively new too. I'm, 2010. A lot of things I don't know, and I rely on the people, the really old folks here in town, to let me know things, and much older than me, like Mr. Olson. So, and
Oops, careful.
but anyway, we do have, there's little things like the certificate of appropriation, okay, whether or not historical had to be involved or not. If it's right-of-way issue, okay, they don't need it. But again, we're giving away right-of-way. They're not giving away, but there's right-of-way issue involved in this thing. So whether or not it should have been, and I think Ms. Oaks hits it on the head too when she talks about, we have ordinances, we have different ordinances in town, we have different policies, we have different codes that we have. Evidently, we do need to look at some of these things, and I think our planning department, our public works, city manager has taken copious notes, and they realize maybe some of the flaws we do have, and I express those sentiments to a lot of our people, our staff. If you see different things that are happening around town that our ordinances just don't apply to anymore, let us know. We can change the ordinances. We can exempt things out of the ordinances. We can revise ordinances. We can make new ordinances. if we need to. And there's no issues with those things of this council getting involved in these type of things. Where do we go from here? This project is basically, it is a management decision on what transpired. I can only hope that it's going to, when it's all finished out, painted, whatever, stuccoed, the whole thing, it doesn't look the best. And again, we have a tree coming out, and we've been talking about trees. I know we talked about live oaks. It's not a live oak, it's a palm tree, but still it's going to come out. It's going to go somewhere else. Okay, we need to do something else. Maybe there's something else that can be done there. And as far as maybe a smaller type tree, caliber tree that can go there, just to give us some kind of nice thing at that corner, might be nice. My big question is, I see that sidewalk or that driveway there. I hope that this is all part of the fixing up scheme over that driveway is going to be repaired. That driveway is, that's worse than, that's not even ADA, that's just a downright tripping hazard. It's a bad spot. But anyway, so I don't know where we go from here, and I don't want to get into a whole other discussion, but and I know we really, it's something that's been done, and I expressed my concerns to the city manager when I finally found out about certain things, and yes, the council wasn't informed, historical board wasn't informed, and planning and zoning wasn't informed on the matter either. Whether or not they needed to be, according to our codes and ordinances, they didn't have to be. So we need policy changes, and we need to look at doing some things like that. We're going to be having all kinds of workshops over the summer. We've got budget workshops coming up. We can address some of these issues now at this point. Right now, it's not on an item on the agenda for any kind of a vote, anything like that. But we do have the options, and through our codes and our ordinances right now, with that sidewalk cafe ordinance, from what I'm gathering, that if things aren't working properly, they can be revised and need to be redone, or whatever has to be done with them at that point. So I'm
Mr.
comfortable with
Mayor,
that.
I hate to bother you, but why can't we compromise? Take that one wall out and put a step there and put the ADA on the
This
side.
is going to be the management decision on this. We're not going to sit here as a council and micromanage this project, okay? If that's what they need to do while this project is still in the work stages, and they can do something to, at this point in time, to, everybody's here, the owner of the property, the leaseholder of the property's here, our city manager's here, and our planning, everybody's here and heard all the comments tonight. So if anything can be adjusted and make this thing a little bit more workable, a little more pleasant, then we're going to have to. But this council is not, I don't think is in a position that we, with our policies, to sit here and order them to do anything at this point. And I think it's incumbent on them to come to us if there's anything that needs to be done with this at this point. And
I'd like to thank Johnny for coming here and facing this. It's a brave thing to do. He's got an excellent restaurant, and I respect him for being required to stand up and answer some questions.
We do have some more items on the agenda, but I want to take, since the number one item on our resolutions, I think it's our next item on here, right, is the number one item, which is Mr.
Senior Town
is here from Sarasota, and I'd like for him to be able to get on the road back home if he wants to. So we can take number one, and so that he can get.
We'll go into the agenda.
Yeah.
We're back on the agenda, yes. And we have, all right, yeah, the title, we have resolution number 2017-63, preliminary plat approval for Lakes Mount Florida, Phase 3C, and Ms. Cockcroft, we have the title read by, or resolution read by title, please.
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2017-63, a resolution of City Council of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, approving the preliminary plat of the Lakes of Mount Dora, Phase 3C, providing for findings, approval of preliminary plat, providing for conflict, severability, and effective date.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, council members. This is a request for the applicants requesting a preliminary plat to approve Phase 3 of the Lakes and Outdoor subdivision. Phase 3 is a cul-de-sac configuration, was formerly slated for a fire and well site. The fire and well uses were removed through a stipulation agreement in 2016. The proposal is an additional 14 single-family residential lots with a master plan community. The Lakes Outdoor PUD was approved for a total of 950 homes, units, lots. Pursuant to the PUD, the master planning conditions, traffic impact analysis are required to follow for the following schedule. First, the 500th building permit to be issued, and then when the 800th certificate of occupancy has been issued. The typical plan here is to go through the review steps, which would be a preliminary plat, planning and zoning commission recommendations, which are then forwarded to the city council. Once the preliminary plat has been approved, then this authorizes the applicant to file the final construction plat. These final plans and plat are reviewed by the DRC Board or Development Review Board Committee, and for consistency with the Plan Unit Development, or the PUD, as discussed earlier, the preliminary plat, the city's land development code, and the platting requirements pursuant to Florida statute. The last step is the final plat, which is once DRC accepts the final plat, this allows the applicant to begin the site infrastructure work through the issuance of the site development. The Planning and Zoning Board Commission, at the regular scheduled meeting on May 17th, recommended approval for the proposed preliminary plat for the Lakes Outdoor. And then the approval is subject to providing the status from FDOT, State Road 44 signalization work, which was also included. As you see, that there's a report, the front cover anyway from FDOT is provided. The full report is available in the planning division with all the information, but the report stated the information in reference to the warrant, signal warrant analysis, and that is actually will continue to be done every so many homes. We've reached out to FDOT. I believe this is the third warrant in that community since I've been here in October. So we'll continue to do that as we go through the process, but staff would recommend this for approval, and I would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any comments from council?
Just one comment, Mr. Mayor. The conditional approval is subject to a condition, and if I understood you correctly, Ms. Manager, that condition is that a continuing condition, or will that condition be satisfied with, because the motion or the resolution does not make it conditional?
Right, so the resolution reads that,
I support it. I just wanted to make sure there's compatibility between the resolution as well as your report.
right, so the report or the resolution reads that consider subject preliminary plat on June 6th. So at its meeting, that's the one conditional, but we've already met the planning and zoning and the other boards, so we've met all of those condition requirements at this point in time. It was just, I believe, the way it was written this time, and we'll kind of clean that up in the future.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Mr. Levy?
Thank you, Mayor. I have just two comments. One, I just wanted to note that the fire and well uses, I think in their stipulation, we still made arrangements for a well site and a fire site, so you know they're still in there, I think. And number two, those 14 additional units will provide extra tax, which was part of the calculation, at least for me in the stipulation, was getting those on the tax rolls as an improved property, so I definitely support this.
I support it as well. The maps that were part of the packet,
Yes.
I think there's an error showing the adjoining property as Loch Levin, and it's not. It's Lancaster and Loch Levin, and I don't know whether that's a big deal or not, but it's not Loch Levin.
Thank you, we'll correct it for the record.
Any other? Anybody from the public wish to address?
We can call that scrivener's errors.
And just to make note, Councilmember Slavy, as he mentioned, that we did retain a well and a fire. It's just not the original sites that we retained. So yes, we definitely still retain that, but it was just a relocation due to the settlement. So thank you, sir.
Mike Masterson, 7887 Crosswinds Way. Just a question, at what point in the process does the obligation to screen the lift station, which is right basically at the corner of whatever this way is and Bridgeport Bay Circle. At what point does the council or the city, some element within the city, require the developer to screen that lift station with shrubbery, et cetera, whatever? Because we have another lift station down at the end of Bridgeport Bay Circle that somebody forgot to enclose with shrubbery, et cetera, and it's enclosed by chain link fence, and it's kind of ugly. As Mr. Slavy pointed out, the developer is going to earn, in my estimate, about $4.5 to $5 million in revenue from the sale of these 14 houses, and that's about $4 million worth of taxable ratables once all the math gets worked out, which is one fall on just 14 houses. So hopefully we can build more and raise the taxable revenue in the city. But I hope that flows upon the developer and not on the HOA as an expense, since I think they can squeeze it out of the $4 to $5 million. So can you tell me where that comes from?
It should come in the process of the occupancy when we get through the site development, and the next process is the building and then the cleaning up of those lots. Then the requirement to do the landscaping would be at that point in time in general.
Yeah.
So, but I can actually reach out to Mr. Peters, and we can kind of give you a firm answer in the future if you would like to do that within the next 30 days.
I just want to make sure that there is a process in place to define it, because it appears it got skipped at one point in time.
Yes, sir.
And so that we don't skip it. That's all.
Yes, sir.
I think the goal should be to have all the lift stations look like the ones in the country club. You can't see them, and that's the way they should be. But if we can get that way, that'd be great. So.
Okay, well, we can steal a few trees from Mr. Rolston. Thank you.
That's a good idea too. And okay, anybody else from the public wish to address? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, we have a roll call, please.
Mr. Creel?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mr. Rolston?
Yes.
Mr. Slavy?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Okay, let's take a 5-10 minute break at this point. 5 minutes. So we get moving.
Come back.